mother has arrived.
This is The World According to Jen and Carolyn. Hey, everybody.
Hey, girl.
What are we talking about today?
Are you a model?
I'm not a model.
Are you a model?
But I really wanted to be a model when I was a kid. I don't think I realized I didn't have what it took to be a model. I was just kind of obsessed with this notion of being a model.
Yeah.
I think it was probably because my much older cousin was actually a working model.
Remember the Barbizon commercial?
Yes.
That's why I thought I could do it.
Yes.
I was like, I could do that. I could turn around in a cool hat and on the street and be like, Barbizon.
They made it seem very accessible, but my understanding is Barbizon was kind of a scam. So yeah, they just wanted your money. They're like, we'll take anybody. And, you know, as we're going to discuss, the parameters for who could and who could not be a model back in our day, the 80s and the 90s, was very constrained, very narrow.
I used to want to like be picked up at a mall because like they'd see me and I was like, all the stories would be like, well, I was at like a Jamba Juice or something.
I was discovered.
I was at Orange Julius.
Yeah.
There was no Jamba Juice yet. And I was at Hot Dog on a Stick.
I was wearing the outfit. I was making the friggin' lemonade.
And the guy just walked up to me and said, are you a model?
Oof.
Come with me to New York.
So yeah, right.
I would do
my
something
whole
like
life
that.
changed, and that's a big problem. We're going to talk about that too. I don't think we've exactly explicitly said that today we are going to be talking about the history of the modeling industry. So as I mentioned, and as you know, if you're a fan of the pod, Carolyn and I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and we grew up with like the most iconic supermodels, you know, Cindy Crawford, Claudia Schiffer, Naomi Campbell, Kate Moss. Those were the women who represented feminine perfection, or what was deemed feminine perfection. But, you know, don't get me started on the dudes like Tyson Beckford. My.
Tyson.
Fabio was a model.
Yeah.
He was not only a model, but he graced the covers of a lot of romance novels like Danielle
really
Steele.
into him.
Me neither. He's not my type. No, not my type at all. And then
Where's your beard and your tattoos?
Yeah, pretty much. That's the kind of model I'm into. And then Jason Lewis, you know who that is, right?
No.
That's Smith.
Jared? Wait, Smith who?
Smith from Sex and the City.
Oh, yeah, Smith Jared.
Yeah. Oh, was that his last name? See,
on the show.
I didn't pay attention.
Well, it was Jared Smith and then he changed it to Smith.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he started as a model.
Oh, I didn't. Well, that
Which makes sense. He's gorgeous.
He's really handsome.
You know, these were hot times, everybody, but they were also dark times. And we love to delve into darkness on this show. So we're going to talk about the history of modeling. You're going to learn about the darkness that we mentioned. That's kind of been an ever-present theme in this industry. And we're going to walk you down the historical catwalk, starting with the early days of modeling and landing, you know, where we are currently with this industry. So Are you ready?
I think so.
You ready to strike a pose?
Yeah.
I'm ready too.
I love all our puns are going to get really ridiculous.
I know.
Today.
This is, we grew up in an age where, you know, music videos had beautiful models. You're like, oh, this George Michael video, it had like all of the top models in it.
Did it, yeah.
You know, and then you had America's Next Top Model, which started pretty early. Yeah. So we'll talk about all that.
Even, what was the show? Star Search.
Oh, Star Search.
Star Search was like, I think
that was like
that
talent,
did it
though.
too. But there was a modeling section.
Was there? I don't remember that.
You were the model of, and there were these really stupid videos.
I don't remember.
Like, oh my God, they were like weird. Yeah, you were the. There was like a name for it. I'll have to look it up.
Okay.
I'll do that while you're talking.
I'm fascinated because I watched Star Search religiously because it was on Saturday afternoons, like late afternoon, prime time when you're 8 and 9 and just, you know, a child of the television. So before we go further down this modeling rabbit hole, who was your favorite supermodel?
Well, it's kind of, it's for a very bizarre Carolyn reason, but you know, again, I can't just pick one. I love them all, but I loved Iman and that was because she was married to David Bowie.
Oh yeah.
So it was sort of like because I was obsessed with, which is ironic that now we know why I don't think Fabio was hot, because I was super attracted to like lanky British dudes.
Yeah. I prefer the androgyny.
Me too.
Prefer my men in makeup.
But I found out about modeling and models. There was remember the Scholastic Book Fair?
Yes.
And one of
they still have them, by the way.
That's lovely.
Liam goes to them.
Oh, I love that. And you get like the monthly like magazines, and my mom would let me like pay. It's how my shopping fantasies began.
Yes.
But I bought a book that was about supermodels.
Yeah.
And Amon was in it. And I just thought she was really beautiful.
She is.
I was also very interested, not interested is a terrible word, but curious about from reading a lot of Alice Walker when I was a kid about genital mutilation.
Oh, geez.
That's in a lot in her later book.
Yeah. She becomes like an activist around that, doesn't she?
Amon talked about that too.
Yeah.
It all like went full circle in my mind. But yeah, my mom always loved fashion. We always had Vogue magazines. And all the magazines. And I had this thing that I would do where I loved to pretend I was a mannequin at stores. And like, I'd go up in the window and everyone thought it was cute. But in my mind, like I had no concept that people could see me.
That's
doing
awesome.
This. And so when someone would say like, oh, how cute, I get really scared. And I would do this and like knock the mannequins down or knock the...
oh, Jesus.
I was also klutzy.
Oh, you're like sister. What was her name? The one that like in SNL, she put her hands in her armpits and then she's like smelling them and doing Catherine Gallagher and like knocking shit over. Yeah, totally.
Molly Shannon. I'm very Molly Shannon like.
Yes, we both are. And fun fact, models back in the day were actually called mannequins.
That makes sense.
Yeah, they were living mannequins. Yeah. So for me, Kate Moss made me feel normal. You remember when I was super skinny and could eat whatever I wanted. I was one of those kids who just could not gain weight. And in high school, freshman year in particular, when Kate Moss kind of really hit the scene for CK, remember she was modeling CK jeans.
Oh yeah.
Everybody was like, oh, she's so skinny. But you know, her look was all of a sudden hip and accepted, like the Twiggy days.
Yes.
And I finally felt normal because I was just like very...
It's me.
I was skin and bones. Yeah. I wasn't trying to be skin and bones. That was just my...
Have an eating disorder, I think, like she had, or a heroin addiction.
I was also just poor and we didn't have a lot of food in my house. And so this is kind of what happens when you don't get fed on a regular basis. So yeah. So she made me feel normal. Yeah. So we're going to take you down the historic path first and foremost, as we're inclined to do on the show. So let's start with the mid 1800s. Charles Frederick Worth, the world's first courtier, also became the did I say that right?
I don't fucking know.
Couture. Is it couture?
Couture. So
yeah.
Couture.
Yeah. Became the world's first designer to use live models instead of mannequins to market his clothing. By the 1920s, modeling had become more of a visible job choice for women, with department stores and retailers across the U.S. regularly staging fashion shows with live models. Cool. Then we go to New York, where all good things happen. In 1923, John Powers opened the very first modeling agency. And in the mid-19th century, the most in-demand photographers could really affect which models were in demand too by specifically requesting to work with those models. Let's look at the 1940s. Model Dorian Lee was one of the most popular. Oh God, if I had a girl, Dorian. It's a girl and a boy name.
Yeah, it is.
It's an awesome name. She was one of the most popular models of the time and appeared on no fewer than 6 Vogue covers. That was big back in the day.
That's a big deal.
Then we had Barbara Golan. She's often referred to as the first British supermodel. What made her super? When she got married in 1954, the ceremony was mobbed by onlookers in a testament to how famous models were becoming with the general public, not just in the fashion industry. Look at that. The British paparazzi, even back then.
Even back then.
Yes. And then we got the 60s. So names like Twiggy, who I mentioned, Twiggy. Patty Boyd was married to both George Harrison and Eric Clapton. And they both wrote songs about her. That song, Wonderful Tonight by Eric Clapton. My darling, you look wonderful. It's about her. Oh yeah.
She did.
She inspired, she always looked wonderful, inspired some of the most famous musicians on the planet. Then there was Jean Shrimpton. And in 1966, we finally got some Black African-American models. We got Donyale Luna, who was the world's first Black supermodel, time dubbed 1966 the Luna year. While the New York Times called Luna a stunning Negro model whose face had the hauteur and feline grace of Nefertiti.
Beautiful.
Cool.
There's a great documentary about her.
Because you asked me, hey, make sure you put her in. And I was like, she's in my timeline. I promise.
Yes, beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful
I was looking
woman.
at pictures of her. What a gorgeous human being.
And so for that time, like her body's just art.
Yeah. Some people are just gorgeous.
Personality too.
Oh, that's cool. I love it. So 1968, we have the pioneer in the industry, Naomi Sims. She became the first Black woman to cover Ladies' Home Journal. This was November 1968. So pretty early given where our country was at that time with the civil rights movement and everything. I think that's awesome. In 1973, November of 1973, the famed Battle of Versailles. All I can think of is Zoolander right now. It was a fashion show. It was held at the French Palace to raise funds for its restoration. And the show featured American designers versus French designers. And much to the French designers' surprise, American designers dominated the competition and included an unprecedented number of Black models for the time, including Pat Cleveland. This reminds me of the oh God, I forget what it's called, but it's in it's the Chateau Montelea bottle shock thing.
I was just gonna say that how French people like couldn't believe that good was it Chardonnay?
It was Chardonnay
that came out of Napa.
Yep,
that's also a good movie.
It's
weird though because you would think, well, maybe we'll talk about this too, but like that France was so much more open-minded. You would think that they would have had more.
You would, because there were a lot of Black folks who moved from the U.S., those who could afford to do so, who would become expats and move to Paris because it was more accepting. Not to say Paris didn't have its own racial issues, and still does, especially with a rise of kind of right-wing leadership over there, which seems to be happening everywhere, unfortunately. But back to our timeline. Then we have Gia Caranaghi. I think I'm saying her name right. Yep. I should. I'm Italian American. She was an American model considered by many to be the first supermodel. In 2023, Harper's Bazaar ranked her 15th among the greatest supermodels in the 80s. After Gia became addicted to heroin, her career rapidly declined, which ultimately led to her quitting modeling in 83. In 1986, at the age of 26, she died of AIDS-related complications. Probably got it from a contaminated needle. I didn't know much about Gia.
Yeah, I don't know how I'm not a lesbian. There's a really Gina Gershon plays her in a really.
I remember that.
It was like I think I saw it on Lifetime again when I was home unsupervised on like a lonely Saturday.
Yeah,
Sorry, Mom. And just really. Like just the quintessential like arc of what happened to that genre of model.
Sad.
Very
sad. And drugs
abused, and then left.
Awful.
Yeah.
And drugs are still pretty prevalent. Later, I'll talk about Janice Dickinson describing going to shoots and just like on the craft services table, maybe there was some food, maybe some celery. I don't know, but there was a lot of drugs.
Well, she in the America's Next Top Model, she's always like, I was the first supermodel.
Yeah. She does think she was the first supermodel, and she was big. Yeah. She was big. I'm not going to discount her, but yeah. And she has attitude, and I like that. I like ladies with attitude and fellas that are in the mood. Don't just stand there. Let's get to it. Strike a pose. There's nothing to it. Vogue. Okay, let's stop.
We're too white for that.
We really are. Although Madonna's the one that really brought it into the main scene. But we all know it was Black and/or BIPOC trans folks, and drag queens that made it big. Anyway, so late in the 80s, that's when we got household names like Naomi Campbell, who's considered the most famous Black supermodel, Christy Turlington, Linda Evangelista, she's so gorgeous.
Her story's really fast.
Gorgeous. I don't know much about her. They became known as the Trinity. And then later we had Kate Moss, Cindy Crawford, and Claudia Schiffer. They joined and became the Big Six in the 90s. And so
Cindy Crawford.
Oh, I know. She's great. She was, she's the best. I mean, they were in everything, commercials, music videos. I mean, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing them.
Isn't there a Nikki?
Oh, Nikki. She was the cover girl.
Yeah.
Face of cover girl. She was gorgeous. It'll come to me.
us.
But I loved her. I wanted to be her. I thought she was so pretty.
Claudia Schiffer.
Oh yeah, gorgeous.
She's still beautiful.
She is still there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So America's Next Top Model, it's created by Tyra Banks, whom I also really love. She goes off the rails and is quite the diva, and I fucking love that about her.
I did love that
but then you also have to wonder, like, these stories about her being a diva, is it just people pushing back because she's black and saying she has attitude, when in actuality she's just, you know, sticking up for herself. And
I can't trust it in this day and age, right?
Yeah. Consider the source is what I always say.
Yeah.
So Tyra Banks, she serves as the executive producer and also created America's Next Top Model, which was developed by Ken Mock and Kenya Barris. And the series premiered way back in May 2003 and aired semi-annually until 2012. And then annually from 2013. I don't think it's on anymore in any capacity.
I mean, they kind of like, I watched it pretty religiously.
Yeah.
And, it got to a point where it's like they kind of done everything.
Yeah.
And it felt the same, but I loved her. And I don't think it's not a credit necessarily to her. I think the top 6 did this, but they really went from models to becoming a brand.
Yes.
And how to kind of take your ownership over your own, like stop being manipulated by the fashion industry. If you can't beat them, join them and become bigger.
Yeah.
And I think that really shifted everything from musicians, celebrities to being able to say like, this is my image, but I'm not just a face. I actually am an image.
Yeah.
And I think that's what made, we'll talk about it at length, but that's what made all these supermodels so phenomenal of the big 6 is they went from being, we're just going to stand there in the clothes.
Yeah.
And it became about them being interactive in these photo shoots and interactive in the fashion itself. And doing weird poses and doing different things. And then you became that brand and that became really powerful for them. So it's anytime a woman can take ownership over something, it's awesome.
Yeah, totally. And it's like athletes using their platform for, civil rights causes and stuff. And, sometimes it works to their advantage. And sometimes like poor Colin Kaepernick, which is totally egregious. And one of the reasons I hate the NFL, it backfires. So use your platform for good. So fast forward to today, and we're actually seeing more models of color, more trans models like Andrea Pejic, sorry if I said that wrong, and Leah T. We're also seeing different body shapes. We're seeing, models with disabilities. We're seeing, who is that absolutely adorable model with Down syndrome? I can't remember. I wish I remember her name. She's great. Yeah. And we need to see that because that, as we talk about on the show, frequently representation matters.
Yes.
And if, a young girl with Down syndrome sees a model that looks like her, it's really going to send the message, hey girl, you can do anything. So important.
White.
She is white. Yeah. She is white and blonde. And still that is what the majority of the industry is still. So, but it's a start. It's a start. And the notion of what constitutes beautiful is starting to change. And so, we can see from this timeline that for what seems like forever, the modeling industry and the entire beauty industry promoted this kind of single white idea of what beauty standards should be. So can we talk about whiteness as a beauty standard and the impact that has had and still has on society?
Well, it's sad to say that it's an oxymoron to me to say there's a beauty standard.
Yeah.
Because how do you, again, I base I'll talk about this in a bit, but it's perspective.
But it's also the reality that there very much is. It's still very much a white European standard.
100%. Because it's what's marketed.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's necessarily reflective even of the demographic, at least that we have.
Yeah.
But, again, as a white woman, I can only base my understanding off of listening to and reading the experiences of people of color.
Yeah.
It's impacted them. And you pointed out a really great article that was in USC's Daily Trojan. It's actually it's a quick read, worth a look, by Lalu. Give me a second. Retsima.
I think that's it.
Okay. And she wrote a 2023 article, and this is her quote. If you're not white, being conventionally pretty is essentially impossible. And that while beauty trends and standards are forever changing, especially in the age of social media, whiteness consistently stays the ideal.
Yeah.
I've worked to unlearn all of these ideas and love myself, but I still notice when I get complimented, it always circles back to my race. And I can be the most attractive person in the world, but it's all despite my race. And we all should work to unlearn the importance of whiteness pertaining to our perception of beauty in ourselves and in others. So here are some of the highlights from the article that I found I think are worth noting. So yes, you're absolutely right, Jen. Our society is absolutely fueled by white supremacy. Women of color will always find themselves in this, what she describes as a losing battle because of centuries of favor and advantage that white women are just given. That's just fact. You can't dispute that.
Yeah.
There's also white women constantly get praised in social situations just for being white, you know, versus, and I can understand where she's coming from, that it's like, oh, you're so pretty in spite of being Black, or you're so pretty because I'm going to point out your race,
or you're pretty because in spite of being Black, you have very white features, like Halle Berry, for instance.
Yes. And well, so she talks about these harmful methods of assimilation, such as chemical hair straightening, skin bleaching. And these were not only marketed to, if you don't know this, you know, there's great documentaries and great factual information about this, but it was marketed towards people of color to get them kind of to hate themselves. And that is from a psychological and a marketing perspective, that's gold. Because if I can if not only can society back this up, but I can get you to internally not think you're white enough, that works in my favor.
Well, you want people to strive for that model minority concept, like Asians have become in our society. Oh, they're the model minority through the lens of white supremacy, right? Oh, their proximity to whiteness makes them accepted by white supremacy. Did you ever, this is different, but did you ever see or watch the video from this experiment that was conducted with little Black girls, and the scientists had them come into a room and pick a white doll or a Black doll, and they always picked the white doll. And when they were asked why, they would say, well, the Black doll's ugly. They internalized that one breaks my heart.
Yeah. Well, and that's very systematically done. Yeah. That only happens, like you said, when you don't see yourself projected as beautiful or as capable. Yeah. You're going to internalize that with that. And that's not, I want to say unplanned, but that's very systematic. Well, it's very intentional. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah. And so, you know, she goes on to say that white women are more likely to, like you said, to be perceived as beautiful compared to definitely to Black women, any woman of color. And that there's often these negative stereotypes that go back to obviously transatlantic slave trade. Yeah. And even within Black culture, that idea of, you know, if you're too Black versus being, you know, the whiter looking Black people, which probably were because their parents were raped, and that's entered into their
they get privilege because
they, you know, so it's just categorically fucked up, but it's the truth. And so, of what her experience is. And, you know, again, putting people in these positions, it's rooted in patriarchal attitudes. White women just, it's fact, are not dehumanized to the extent that a woman of color is. No. And so you and I have no concept of what that is like. Yeah. And I think that when whiteness is set as a standard of beauty, and then you see that reflected in images, it works internally and externally. Yeah. And you become part of that. And, you know, again, this doesn't exactly, I think that answers the question, but, you know, I went back to, you know, what even is beautiful? Can you call, someone had to create that construct. Yeah. You know, I wouldn't look at a rose versus a daisy. They're all flowers and I find them beautiful in their own way. There's no reason that you should not feel free to do that within humanity. We're told, and then we internalize that. And that, I think that happens. That is a female experience. I can talk to that as a female. I can understand that. I can't imagine having that overlaid over your nose isn't the right way. Yeah. Your skin isn't the right way. Right. Your body shape isn't the right way. Yeah. So, you know, again, I think that's definitely a feminine experience, but who gets to decide this? Yeah. Who gets to decide how we feel about this? Well, you know, again, it's a made up construct. And I think we can all answer that with both a money trail and the deep pockets of white Anglo-Saxon privilege. Yeah. And I will mention, I won't go into it, but there was another article that we linked in the show notes, standard issue, which began in 2020 as part of Jessica DeFino's mission to destroy the beauty industry and build something better. She's wrote a fantastic article in Teen Vogue. You must read this. I'll do a better link on it. But she quotes books like The Beauty Myth, Beauty Sick, The History of Aesthetics, Branded Beauty, War Paint, Toxic Beauty, all these different books that really go what she calls kind of the colonizer mindset.
Awesome.
It is the colonizer.
Yeah.
It's a Western colonialism, Eurocentric beauty standards essentially becoming global beauty standards.
I love that this is showing up in Teen Vogue.
Yes. Yeah.
That really makes me happy. In fact, so often when I'm doing research around this, the beauty industry, because we've done several episodes, Teen Vogue has some really good sources.
Well, we have to look at our youth. And you're going to save us. And it, again, I would say anything she's written, this is a very worthy article to read. The history, how she goes back into sort of feminine backlash and how even anti-feminist ways that it's all for political purposes, that beauty standards and self-empowerment has been turned against us.
Sure.
And if you know that, you can question that. L'Oreal coming up with the phrase, I'm worth it. Yeah. Like saying that's self-empowerment, but it's based off the fact that internally we're all saying I'm not worth it. Yeah. It's fucked up.
Yeah. You have to remind yourself that you're worth it instead of that just being your perpetual state of existence, that you have worth and value.
And you're being sold something.
Yes.
Whenever you're being sold something, you should question it.
Yes.
Because it's based off an inherent, and then she talks about sort of the backlash that Dove got with their campaign, kind of summing up kind of like, oh, we're going to take regular women are beautiful. We're going to cure your cellulite though, which is something you can't get rid of. Yeah. It's part of being a woman. Right. It's part of how our, you could do things to stay physically fit. Yeah. I have a spot on my body. I have the skinniest little twig legs. I've always had this little cellulite bump. It's not going away. I could use Dove lotion all I want. I ain't going to do shit. No. And so again, even subtly psychologically manipulating these foundations upon which beauty is marketed and built. This is how they sell products. And it's intentionally meant to maintain a patriarchy. It has political purposes, and we have to talk about this. And we have to be able to have an open dialogue as women and men, because I don't think it's been helpful for men. It certainly hasn't been helpful for anyone who identifies as non-binary. Right. And yes, while we are seeing that now, we're also being sold this image that, oh, now it's okay. So it is. And it's like, oh, so now that the beauty industry decides it's okay, now we can see it. Right. And there's something to be said of like the visibility and the changes that are happening and like using the platform of the beauty industry to do that. And, to go back to what you said, it has been good for white men. And this whole, notion of perpetuating whiteness as the standard of perfection. And it's been good for white women. And I think whenever you're trying to get a white person who's a direct beneficiary of this system to say this is inequitable, and even though it benefits me, I'm not going to abide by it to the extent that I can or can't, even though I am directly benefiting. I think that's a hard link for people, one, to make, and two, to say I'm no longer going to support this system. And that's why, white women, their value is often determined by their proximity to white men. Like, I know women like that kind of in my life. Can't pick your family, folks, who have know what they'd call feminist values. And you can tell that their value is inextricably linked to their husband and the powerful white men in their lives. And they're not going to readily give that up. Which is sad. It is. I think we see things from a different perspective. And we also have the benefit of higher education. And even then, still, again, there's no fault. I think when it goes back to the calling in and canceling out and whatnot, it's not to make you feel like shit about yourself. No. If that's where you go with it, and as someone who tends to lean more negative oftentimes, use it to create conversation and dialogue and create positive impact. Yeah. And that's what education is there for. It's supposed to make you question, it's supposed to make you critically think. Right. And if you're not able to look at what your biases are and see that you have them, like I would say to any listener, like pick take a moment and think, what are the 3 things that I have a hard time understanding about the world? And then, or myself, or letting go of, and that's your litmus of like, you actually, if you can't think of any, that's a problem.
Yeah, no, I agree. You gotta really internalize this shit. You gotta really get reflective. So, we love talking about the dark side. I don't think we've really focused on the positives yet. So I think we're probably going to focus primarily of the dark side of this industry. And we're happy to see that the industry is showcasing a greater diversity of modeling, but there are major issues that persist. And so I think a lot of us are well versed on what Carolyn touched on, which is the beauty industry perpetuating these unrealistic and very white beauty standards. But I want to talk about some of the less explored controversies associated with this industry. So I found this BuzzNet article that I thought summed it up really well. So they talk about the age of models. That's long been a controversial topic. In some countries, there's no age limit. While some require girls to be at least 15 or 16. In America, a modeling agency isn't allowed to recruit anyone under than 16, but younger girls can still freelance. So the Department of Labor didn't even start protecting child models until 2013.
It's bizarre to me.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It reminds me a bit of the entertainment industry, even though there's more regulations around that.
Yeah.
2013, that's pretty recent. So, plastic surgery is usually the choice of the model in America, but in other countries, and we're big proponents of plastic surgery. So if it's your choice to do it, do it. But in other countries, it's practically become a requirement. So in particular, apparently it's almost impossible to be a celebrity or a model in South Korea without getting double eyelid surgery. The plastic surgery gives South Korean women more Western looking eyes. Again, there's that if we look more white, we're more beautiful standard. If a model does manage to climb out of debt, so the pay is a real problem, the compensation. If they manage to climb out of debt from their agency and book gigs consistently, the average salary is only about $48,000 a year. Most models live in communal apartments owned by their agency. The apartments usually have 4 to 6 girls crammed into a 1-bedroom apartment. That sounds like my own personal hell. Body dysmorphia can also add to pressure. Many models have reported having completely skewed ideas of what they look like because they're constantly told you're too fat, too curvy, etc. Fill in the blank. The scariest of all is I had never heard of this, but it reminds me of your dance instructor, the tissue diet that you were encouraged to go on. There's something called the cotton ball diet, and models, it's just what it sounds. Models are eating cotton, and sometimes they'll soak them in juice to trick your body into thinking you're eating real food. That can't be good for your digestive
really
tract.
Bad.
Other diets include only liquids, using laxatives, smoking cigarettes, all in an effort to look thin and curb their appetite. And then the fashion industry has always been notorious for the partying lifestyle, and that goes hand in hand with drug abuse. One expose done by Vice showed that many New York city drug dealers know they can make a fortune if they hang around certain areas during Fashion Week.
Wow.
That's crazy. Fashion Week's coming, y'all. We better hit this corner.
And it's all sanctioned because they're all rich and white.
Yeah, exactly.
So you don't see anyone, you're doing that in the Tenderloin.
Right.
You're homeless and cuckoo.
Yeah.
You're doing that at Fashion Week. You're chic.
Yeah. You're not going to have cops just randomly busting you as you walk down the street or drive down the street.
If that's not equitable, I don't know what
there ain't no stop and frisk when it comes to attractive white people attending Fashion Week. That's for sure. So if you're wondering just how seedy the modeling industry is, behind the scenes, drugs and alcohol are often provided for free by agents at photo shoots to keep the girls happy and thin. So this is Janice was saying.
I love how they say happy.
Yeah.
Maybe
well, it's a false sense of happiness. I mean, if you're on Coke, you get those endorphins running through your brain and it's kind of simulated happiness. So, and then you come down and you're hungry and you just want to smoke a joint. I've never done Coke. So Janice Dickinson was talking about all the drugs at the craft services table. And with so many models struggling to earn a living wage, it makes sense that they turn to other lucrative jobs like sex work, high-end escorts. So this is especially common in France and overseas. Now, you can do what you want with your body, but if it becomes survival sex work,
right?
And if that's the only way you can fulfill your dream of becoming a model is by subsidizing your modeling wages with selling that ass, and it's not something you really want to do, that sucks.
Well, and I also think that the addiction piece, it's survival addiction, because if you're having to hustle, to constantly go to look-sees, I think they're called.
Oh, okay. Auditions, basically.
And be a million different places to book gigs and do these gigs. You're going to need to be doing some methamphetamines or cocaine,
some
things
speed
to keep you up
and to curb your appetite so you don't eat because you don't put gigs if you're considered fat.
Yes.
So crazy stuff. Cyclical. Yeah. Chrissy Teigen exposed the secret dealings of a model in an interview with Du Jour magazine. She said that some girls would slip away after a one-way show and make as much as $30,000 a night doing escorting. That's big money.
That is big money.
Almost tempted to change careers, but I'm old now.
I'm really bad at it too.
I know. I dance sexy. I'd be like, yes. Do you like this? Do you like what you see? I'd be like, get the fuck out of my hotel room. So with all the other accounts of exploitation and pressure, sexual abuse is sadly an all too common occurrence in the modeling industry. And often this happens with people in powerful positions like photographers and casting agents. Harvey Weinstein. Young models feel that if they resist a report, they won't stand a chance in the industry. They're going to get blackballed. And so there have been many reports of fake casting calls online that models will arrive only to be attacked, abused, and sometimes even kidnapped. So because I am very immersed in the true crime universe, I got stories for you that come from luring people under false pretenses. And so there was a serial killer named Christopher Bernard Wilder. He was known as a beauty queen killer and the snapshot killer. He was Australian American. He was a serial killer. He abducted at least 12 young women and girls, killing 8 of them during a 6-week cross-country crime spree in the United States in early 1984. Yeah. He would tell people he was a casting agent and that he'd get them. He'd show up at remember in the 80s, malls would have these fashion shows and stuff. He would abduct girls from there.
Not having any industry standards or any government oversight. And that it's like the casting couch. It's like, it wasn't weird to go to a hotel room, which is weird to go for a job interview at a hotel room.
Yeah, totally. And Harvey Weinstein's there in his robe and his dick is falling out. Gross. But I was also thinking about, I can't remember the name of this serial killer, but this motherfucker would meet women in LA and say that he was casting for a Bond movie. And he would tell them to show up in a particular outfit and then he would kill them. But finally, one girl came with her boyfriend and was like, this dude's fucking creepy. And then
don't go.
Yes. Follow your gut, but also it could be legit. Just bring your boyfriend. Dude told boyfriend, panicked. She was the one I think that was able to go back to the police once information started coming out about the girls who were killed and say, dude, I recognize this ploy and I remember this guy and I can tell you where to find him. Scary stuff. So not modeling necessarily, but still industry kind of stuff. And then we have Rodney Alcala, the dating game killer. He was on death row and he's been on death row. He died recently.
I remember you talking about him before.
He's awful, but he used photography to lure some of his victims. And he followed in the footsteps of other serial killers like Harvey Glatman, the glamour girl slayer of the 1950s, who hired models to pose for him and later murdered him. Alcala was the worst. He really was. After he died, they found, the cops found pictures, tons of pictures of unidentified women. And some of them were too graphic to show to the public, but others, they're like, do you recognize first of all, anybody out there, is this you in this picture? We need help figuring things out. Or are family members, do you have a missing family member? Is this one of your family members? Terrible. But they called him the dating game killer because this motherfucker went on the dating game calling himself a successful photographer, and the other bachelors found him fucking creepy. And then the woman he was supposed to go out on a date with also was like, nope. He's too creepy. So yeah, crazy. And then I just listened to, I'm going to link this in our show notes. It was a really good 2020 podcast about Peter Nygard. And I didn't know anything really about Peter Nygard.
Yeah. So I don't know.
I got this information from Yahoo News. He was a fashion mogul. Peter Nygard, he was charged in a 9-count federal indictment and faces lawsuits filed by dozens of women and girls who accuse him of sex trafficking and sexual assault spanning decades. He was kind of like Epstein. He didn't own the island like Epstein did, but he had a Caribbean island and he would traffic young women in, many of whom were aspiring models, actors, whatever the case may be. He would also get women from the Caribbean community, young women, teenagers, and lure them with the promise of parties and drugs and everything. And then he would sexually assault them. It was fucking awful. And one of the women that he raped, I think he just got convicted actually, which is great. Good. So he raped a woman named Beverly Peel. Do you remember Beverly Peel? She was a big model. She was gorgeous, statuesque Black woman. And he raped her, and she had a baby by him. And when the kid was 12, it was a tough thing for her because she wanted the dad to be in the kid's life and said he was a good dad by all accounts, but he was also a rapist who threw these pamper parties, he would, do terrible things to women. And it was Peel's son when he was a little bit older.
I know her.
Yes.
She's
once
beautiful.
You see her face. Yeah. He was like, Mom, you got to say something. Like there's all these other people coming out saying stuff, like say something. And she did. And clearly she raised an amazing young man who's encouraging his mom to come forward and add to the chorus of voices who are saying this guy was a fucking rapist and a pedophile and a sex trafficker. But, again, lured by the promise oftentimes of contracts and modeling, when the king of the fashion industry basically is like,
sorry to be mean, but he's disgusting.
He is disgusting.
He is literally, he looks like
he's creepy.
Pull out of your shower drain.
Oh yeah. He is a disgusting human being, both inside and out.
Prince Andrew's pal. Weird.
Oh, I know. See it. All roads lead to Epstein. So I'm sure they partied together a lot. So,
ew, God. I mean, ugh.
I know.
Why did I just look at that picture?
Dude,
don't look it up, y'all.
I don't know. The 2020 thing was crazy. They have like former employees saying there'd be girls pounding on the windows and being like, let me out, let me out. And they'd let the girls out, and he'd be like, why the fuck did you let that person out? And he'd like fire them. He'd take your passport upon arriving at the island. Like, he was a fucking creep. Is a creep.
Women.
I hope he spends a lot of time in jail. So, Carolyn, a lot of folks out there are going to say, at least when it comes to the adult models, and maybe even sometimes the kid models, they made these decisions to do drugs, engage in sex work, do things that they're not comfortable with, etc. Can we talk about how psychologically this is really overly simplistic?
Yeah. I mean, to me, this really reeks of victim blaming.
Yeah.
Right. Like, Jen, have you heard of an organization called the Model Alliance?
No.
Okay. So this is a New York-based 501c3 nonprofit org, and it advances workers' rights in both the fashion industry and works on child labor protections in the model industry, creating what they call look back window for adult survivors, and sexual abuse to pursue justice. And they have definitely worked to make it a more safer, more equitable, not just within the industry, but within how it's the research is done.
Okay.
So I found it's a great website, and they do a lot of good research, and they have a lot of personal stories, which again is I think that could be both empowering and also incredibly vulnerable to someone to actually tell their story. But to me, human experience is always what, you're not just a number.
Personal stories.
Personal stories.
Yeah.
So they talk about a lot of statistics. 93% of models start working before the age of 21. We've talked about on the show many times. At 21, you don't know shit.
No.
I'm 42.
Yeah.
And I'm just starting to kind of understand who I am and what I am and all these different things. And I know that's going to change. 55% start between the ages of 13 and 16.
Wow.
No fucking way are you in a capacity intellectually, cognitively, developmentally, any of the leads.
You better hope your parents are perpetually there. And
we'll talk about that. Over 68% of models surveyed suffer, we talked about this earlier, but anorexia, depression, combination of mental health disorders. 30% talk about being sexually harassed. 28% have been pressured into sex with someone in the industry, which to me is still rape. And most of the models said they never told anyone. Yeah. So over 2/3 of those who did report the harassments, they were then blackballed from the industry. Same type of shit. Right. And so, again, many of them, they're not adults. Yeah. And you see that same power dynamic that makes harassment. And it's that feel of, that quid pro quo under extreme pressure. Yeah. And if, God, I did some dumb fucking shit at 16. I did some dumb fucking shit at 30. If you are dangling money or partying or things like that, or social climbing, I can understand. I'm not going to hold it against someone at any age for wanting those things. Yeah. And, again, in order to keep, like we talked about before, in order to kind of keep up with everything, you would have had to have been on drugs. I don't see how you could do that. Yeah. I couldn't even stay awake past 8:30. Right. And so, if the industry is dangling money, glamour, and it's built on doing what those in power need you to do and sort of what the standard is, you fall in line or you don't get to play.
Anybody out there who's saying, well, I wouldn't, trust me.
You would.
You would, especially at 21, 22.
And like you said, again, many of these weren't, they might have had a parent with them. But we also know from looking at Hollywood and different industries, the kind of the mother, usually was mothers, not always fathers. And, again, if your parent is set to make money off of you, I don't know that I can even trust that.
Well, they're groomed too.
And they weren't allowed on the set.
Yeah.
And, and again, at that age, like we talked about in the episode we did on child stars.
Yeah.
You're a kid and you're at that age where you want to separate from your parent. You want individual. You don't want them hanging around.
Right.
So you're going to have a little bit more ability to do that. So I definitely don't think that's fair. A really good article in Psychology Today by trauma psychologist Robert Mueller took the experiences of someone named Nikki DeBose and highlighted how models face routine exploitation and mental health issues and literally just need more protection.
Yeah.
Not to say that government protection is going to actually be, we know that there is protection even for sexual harassment in the workplace, and it's not always upheld, but it's a start. So he talks a lot about different education, legislation that can be happening, teaching people about what sexual harassment is, what, safety is, all these different ways that you can develop plans and know what to do and even know what's happening to you. So prevention, and the research and the personal stories speak for themselves, though. And I think for every moment, yes, there are awesome things that come out of this too.
Sure.
They're awesome. And you look at someone like Claudia Schiffer or Cindy Crawford, who educated, what is a woman and also a model. Yeah. And had a different family system coming up. So yes, there are, but those are privilege protections that she had built in that sort of did offer her that level of protection. Yeah. And, again, within Hollywood or within any entertainment, when you have powerful white men and powerful white women too, I don't know that I'm going to trust it. I found a very long read, but it's a good article. It's called Model Existence. Okay. And it's actually by two former models, now psychologists, Vivian Diller and Jill Muir, Sukanek. And the highlights from this it's a very good article, but talking about the parallels of kind of like what I just said, going in strong as a woman who became a model versus a model who then had to become a woman. Okay. And sort of how age plays into that, how your motivation, how your own internal self-worth and self-confidence, what your family system, all these things that are built in. And they talk about how the modeling profession includes a high proportion of women with what they call fragile personalities that make them potentially self-destructive, women that we call extreme narcissistic vulnerability. In fact, they contend that the profession doesn't simply attract and embrace women with this problem, it actively supports and reinforces it, which I absolutely think is true. And narcissistic vulnerability, if you don't know what that is, it's sort of something that we have, we look to our parents to mirror our self-image and sense of self until we get our own and see ourselves as separate and worthy. And it causes both an internal wound to the person, so if you don't have, you're supposed to develop that. Yeah. You care what your parents think and then you kind of don't care what your parents think. Yeah. So then you kind of care again or whatnot. And that, a child who starts in this industry and then is kind of abused, in my mind, they're then sort of left on their own devices to kind of like figure shit out when they've had no instruction, no support of finding that sense of self. It's all image based. It's all external. Yeah. And then she also made the article also makes a really interesting point about how that narcissistic wound is also impacted on the viewer themselves. That when we look at these, and I can definitely speak to this, opening up the pages of 17 models and saying, ooh, I want to be like them. Right. But it's based off something I feel is missing in myself, and it plays on that. Right. And it's meant to. That's very calculated.
Yeah. It's meant to make us feel insecure and also make them feel insecure, especially when your entire identity and your ability to make money is predicated on your appearance. Of course, you're going to become obsessed with your appearance, your weight, it's just, it comes with the territory.
When you start to question, like, I just got my hair done yesterday and I hadn't done it for a while because I just didn't want to pay the money. But I was getting all these grays and I was like, I know I don't like this, but I also, it was such an interesting sort of like, I feel better about myself now.
Yeah.
And what is that?
Well, that's the beauty industry telling us that we need to fight against aging or anything that looks like aging at all costs. Newsflash, we're all aging.
Yeah.
Some of us don't necessarily like the appearance of aging when it comes to our own faces and bodies. And that's okay. Again, we've talked extensively on the show about you are allowed to do whatever you want to your body for whatever reason, as long as you're not hurting yourself. And you know, everybody's allowed to have those views, but it really is important to question why we feel this way. And is it having a deleterious and negative impact on our overall state of being, our self-esteem, et cetera?
And what are you willing to do and put yourself at risk to do?
Yeah.
You know, again, I think knowing yourself really well or having a good conversation or thought process about that, you know, is worth the time versus just saying, I'm going to go do something that's mine was more financially driven.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting, like granted, I'm no model, but when I get a lot of compliments, you know, like people will compliment my hair, you know, they'll tell me they love my outfits, you look pretty, etc. And when you hear that literally every day from strangers, there becomes this need, at least for me, to keep that up.
Well, and when I don't have my makeup on, I don't have things, people will be like, oh, are you okay?
Right. Are you sick today?
I don't have my face on.
Right.
And, you know, that was the one thing I loved about the pandemic too.
Yeah.
Is like we all just kind of were like, fuck it.
Totally.
You know, but we all were doing that. And again, it shows the privilege that I was able to like, that was my hardship was, I can't get my nails done. I can't color my hair.
Yeah.
You know, but it's hard to know. It's hard to separate. And I think any person can identify with that idea. It's hard to really separate. And do I not like this because of I don't like it?
Right.
Or do I not like this because of how people are perceiving me?
Yep.
Or do I not like this because of what I've been seeing?
Yeah. No, there's a lot. Being a woman is really hard. And being a woman of color, I can imagine is only harder, 10 times harder. So, you know, to kind of wrap all this up, the beauty industry and the modeling industry is changing for the better. It's slow change, like most change. But, you know, we've made some strides. In the early 1990s, the beauty standards for models in the fashion industry were primarily focused on tall, thin, white physical appearance. Models were expected to conform to a very specific body type, measurements, you know, 34, 24, 34 for bust, waist, and hips was the ideal. And in the early 2000s, the standards for body measurements were similar to those of the 90s. However, there was a growing awareness of the need for greater diversity and inclusion in the industry, with more models of color and different body types starting to appear in fashion shows and campaigns. Yay. So today, the beauty standards for models in the fashion industry are becoming more inclusive, with a focus on diversity in terms of race, size, age, ability, all of that stuff. Additionally, there is more representation of models with disabilities, different abilities. You know, brands are increasingly looking to feature models with a range of skin tones and ethnicities. I still get Vogue. I still get Vanity Fair. Vanity Fair primarily for the articles because they're stellar and progressive. But I open that up and I am pleasantly surprised by the array of models that I see. And it's cool. I really love it. And there are a lot of people that don't. And they push back, like the people who are like, oh, there's too many mixed families in commercials. There's too many people of color. I'm like, where do you live where this isn't the norm for you? Because I'm in San Francisco where, you know.
Why does it bother you?
It bothers them because it bothers them because it's butting up against what they consider to be, you know, their place in society. It's whether they realize it or not, white people, that is, it's chipping away at their dominance. It's chipping away at what people consider to be the norm. And there is a loss of power inherent in that, whether or not they'd be able to name that, it's happening. And so that's what's going on. And I love it. I'm all here for it. So we're all going to be brown in the next 50 years anyway, if our planet survives.
Wasn't that a South Park episode?
Probably, yeah.
Like at some point we're all just this muted, you know, color, and it doesn't even. That'd be nice.
Yeah, I mean, We'll see what happens, but we are becoming more and more mixed as a society. And that's just a fact. So this is from a Shift London article. According to a survey conducted in the Fashion Spot's diversity report in 2016, the fact that they have a diversity report is awesome. 78.2% of models featured in the spring 2016 fashion advertisements were white. All right. Only 8.3% of those were Black, 4% were Asian, 3.8% were Hispanic or Latino. All right. So the current stats show that the most common ethnicity among runway models is still white. They make up 55.8% of all runway models. Comparatively, 17.1% of runway models are Black or African American. 12% of runway models are Hispanic or Latino. So we still have a lot of work to do. And then I thought this was a really good point. So hijabi ex-model Halima Aden spoke about this issue, stating, there needs to be diversity in the makeup crew and the hair crew and the stylists. It's not just about having a diverse catwalk. It's also about the people behind the scenes, which makes sense. And a ton of, Black models have said, like, the people who are doing the hair and the makeup don't know how to work with black skin, black hair. Like, they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so that makes sense too. What's going on behind the scenes matters as well. And so, the change in beauty standards in the modeling industry has been caused by a combination of factors, but one major factor has been the growing movement for greater diversity and inclusion in the fashion industry. And another major factor, really, it's the rise of social media. Yeah. It's enabled more diverse voices and perspectives to be heard. And now my understanding is, and far be it for me to know anything about the modeling industry, but they're looking for people who not only can be splashed on the pages of fashion magazines and walk the runway, but it's like, what kind of social media presence do you have? Yeah. Can you garner a social media presence?
Right. That's a big deal too.
And social media, anybody can make YouTube videos. Anybody can make fashion videos. Yeah. Look at us.
Well, and in my head, it's like, if there's money to be made, why not diversify? Like, if you can't beat them, join them, right?
Yeah.
Like, make money off everyone.
Yeah. Except if
the political side of it.
Yeah. I mean, if it depends,
so white supremacy driven.
Yeah. It really depends on where, where your lens is and what you consider to be beautiful. And like Karl Lagerfeld died last year. Mm-hmm. And there were all these tributes to Karl as being just like a titan in the industry. But there were also a lot of stories coming out about how abusive he was, calling people fat and just not being a very nice guy and perpetuating every single one of these standards that we're talking about today. And he's old school. And I'm not making excuses, but you have to hope that the people who are prominent today aren't going to continue perpetuating this shit.
That always, like we were talking this morning in the car about hope. And like, the hope I have is that, in the same way you and I grew up seeing different things on TV that our parents didn't see. Yeah. That infiltrated sort of our zeitgeist. And now youth are hopefully seeing that as well. And because of social media, they hopefully are seeing that broadness, that same mentality of what's the big deal. Yeah. Like, why does that matter? It's what's inside. It's in that is a throwback to actually what does matter. Yeah. What's beautiful. What's beautiful. What's beautiful to me is perspective. Yeah. You can't, I know you can monetize that, but that's going to appeal to different people for different reasons. So.
Well, we have to get past the right perpetuating this notion of go woke, go broke.
Which I the phrase?
Oh yeah. I follow a lot of right-wing media because I got to stay up on what these motherfuckers are saying and doing. And that's what they're saying. And this like denigration.
Fear-based.
It is fear-based. It's exactly what I was talking about previously. But this denigration of diversity is so fucking whack to me. And when we look at somebody like Vice President Kamala Harris, who's now running for president of the United States, which that's my Emerge sister, everybody. We both went through, I think she actually helped create the Emerge program here in California, a program that helps Democratic women run for public office. And, people are calling her, the right are calling her DEI. Not diversity, equity, and inclusion. Didn't earn it. That's their big phrase. That's Elon Musk's big phrase. All these folks on the right didn't earn it. And right wingers, Republicans are saying, stop it. They're realizing that's the new N word, to say you didn't earn it because you're black. And though they may think that way, they're starting really to understand we can't say these things because people are starting to say, hey, wait a minute, that's fucking racist. But there are still plenty of people who think that sort of philosophy, ideology, and terminology is fucking okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And they're white supremacists.
Yeah, they are, whether they,
you're a neo-Nazi.
Or, you're on your soapbox saying, I have black friends. Well, you can still be a racist because the ideologies.
When you say that kind of inherently proves the point.
Don't say I have black friends when you're trying to prove you're not racist. And if you're white, you always have learning to do.
Yes.
So there's never an end. There's never an end point when it comes to cultural humility and learning. And because you always have to listen.
Yes.
It's like you said, individual stories and perspectives.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to hopefully change hearts and minds. Anyway, so
digress.
Well, kind of. It's all related. The final thought on this really is, most industries and systems in this country were, and to an extent still are, based on the exclusion of people of color and the promotion of white European ideals and standards. So the modeling industry is definitely not an exception. However, change, albeit slow, is happening, just as it's happening in our Senate, our Congress, our schools, our boardrooms, etc. But it doesn't happen in a vacuum, nor is it a product of people in power waking up one day and benevolently making more equitable systems that directly benefit, people of color or, minorities, whatever you want to call folks who aren't white men. Change in the modeling industry has happened because models and those of us who love fashion but don't look like models are calling for change. Yeah. So just keep in mind whenever you feel hopeless, whenever you feel like change is coming too slow, that change does not happen without us, those of us on the ground with lived experience who are pushing for lawmakers and people who do actually have the power to make those changes. So keep pushing. Be mindful.
Take a moment.
Yeah.
Take a break. Breathe.
Yeah.
Question what you're looking at. Question how it's making you feel.
Yeah.
Go to therapy.
Yeah. Definitely.
Talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your partners, talk to your communities, and have these conversations.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. We will leave you with that thought. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next week when we're going to bring you the interesting wide world of fetishes.
I'm excited for that.
I am too. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye.